Welcome, everybody. This is a podcast or webinar or power hour with Aubrey Nation. Everyone's familiar with her. And if you're not, she is a registered nurse here in New Zealand, but also a Nutrigenomics practitioner. And she's very familiar to the Heart Place Hospital community. We've done a podcast together. We've done a power hour together on harmonizing our hormones. And I also love a webinar that you've done, Aubrey, and we're going to put them all in the show notes. But today I was really, really keen to get together with you and share with others actually what a blueprint looks like, what a nutrigenomics blueprint looks like. And so once again, I'm putting myself on the table and I'm really happy to share what my blueprint and the difference it's made in my life, and in my health and in my life. And it's taken away all that confusion and all that overwhelm that I was experiencing, and it actually made a hell of a lot of sense as well. Making this up as we go along. We're going to share the screen and show my blueprint and just have a wee riff around what we discovered for me.
Yeah, perfect. So before I share my screen and share some of your results, the first thing I will just briefly talk about is that the type of genetic testing that I do, and I refer to it often as functional genetic testing because it is not clinical genetic testing, meaning that, and I will differentiate between the two. Clinical genetic testing is more for disease-based genes, right? So thinking about cystic fibrosis and things like that, where you've inherited a gene, that means that unfortunately you end up with that disease. That is extremely rare. It's not a common thing for all that we're told a lot in this day. As in the medical system, at least, a lot of your GPs and things will say, unfortunately, yes, you've got high blood pressure, for example, in your family. And so that means that you've got an increased risk. There is some truth to that, but we have a lot of control and over whether we actually end up with that high blood pressure or not. It is not you've got high blood pressure genes, that means you're going to end up with high blood pressure. That is more a lifestyle thing, and it is something that I look at in functional genomics because we get to look at how the body system works. So a gene equals a disease is very, very rare, whereas a gene impacting the body and impacting the body's function is what I look at in functional genomics. And if we're keeping with the blood pressure example, yes, there are genes that can mean that some people are a little bit more prone to high blood pressure, but their lifestyle actually dictates whether they're going to end up with that and the interaction between their genes and their lifestyle. So I just want to, I guess, reiterate that before we jump in. Now, let me share my screen and show some of Jacqui's results. So when you do testing with me, you get several different reports. This report is just one of them. And as you can see there, it is called food choice. It's about intolerances and sensitivities and things like that. But before we dive into this report, what I always go through with everybody is, and in every single report you get an introduction, right, into what the genetic testing is. So it kind of outlines what I just talked about. And the science of functional genetic testing is something called nutrigenomics and or nutrigenetics. So it's just how your body and how your genes interact with your environment. Nutri is based on obviously nutrition, but we know now that there's more to it than just what we put in our mouths. It also includes like our stress, our sleep, and other kind of lifestyle factors, how we move our bodies and things like that. So that's the science that this genetic testing is based on, and it gives you a wee bit of a 101 in all of the reports. The key to all of these reports and is this traffic light system. So when we're looking at every single report that you've got, everything comes up in either a green, an orange, or a red. So pretty straightforward. You can see there that the green is your beneficial, so your genetic strengths, and then your red is your least beneficial, so technically your kind of genetic weaknesses. The orange is the in-between. So where it all sort of sits in terms of what you've inherited is the green means you've inherited a copy or two copies, so one from mum and one from dad. that function as optimal. So you can thank mum and dad for those. The red is you've inherited both copies that is suboptimal, and then the orange is the in between. So one that is optimal and one that's not. And we don't know who it's from, so that one's a little bit more up to interpretation as to who you want to blame. You could probably tell by how they what their life cycle and what their health and things is like, but that's kind of how it works. This is very simplistic, and it doesn't necessarily mean that just because you've got a red on a particular gene that it's all bad. There is no good and bad genes. It's just variation, and that's the cool thing about it. It's what makes you you. There is always pros and cons to every single variation that you have, and so I guess I always reiterate to people that just because you've got reds and oranges, and let me just say that everybody has a lot of reds and oranges. It's very common. You're not going to get all greens, because again, like I said, there's pros and cons to both. And so it's understanding that where are your weak points and where are your strengths, and then that allows you to sort of determine a bit of a plan of where to focus. So does that all make sense? Have I explained that from your memory, from what you...
Beautiful. Yeah, that makes sense. I remember all that. Yeah.
Great. Okay, the other thing that I usually cover is around talking more into the good and the bad genes. I guess how we define what is suboptimal and what is optimal is that the suboptimal means that it's not in alignment with this day and age. And the reason I bring that point up is because our bodies and our genetics still want to function, or still pretty much function, as if we are cave people. So our modern worlds, there's been a lot of sort of technology and a lot of advancement, but our genetics haven't changed that much. And so when we say, okay, this is least beneficial or this is suboptimal, it's for this day and age. And the example I often give is when we're looking at inflammation, for example, and inflammatory genes, and whether you're prone to more sort of inflammation or a chronic inflammation in your body. A lot of people have a lot of oranges and reds in there, and we'll get into that when we get into that report. I can show you, but people often think, oh no, and that actually was a survival mechanism back when you were just hunting and gathering a couple of 100 years ago, right? When there was less threats to your survival, there was not as many viruses and toxins and pesticides and all of these kinds of things in our environment. It meant that our immune system, we needed a robust and a ready-to-act immune system when we were exposed to a cut or a wound or something like that would be hunting. And so having that overactive inflammatory response was actually a good thing back then, whereas now, because there's things that constantly bombard our immune system and constantly require inflammation in our body, it's not such a great thing. So again, just to dive a little bit deeper on there's not good and bad genes. It's just the environment that we're currently in, and trying to kind of differentiate between, or not differentiate, but harmonize between where your genes are and what your strengths and weaknesses are in your genes and our modern day and our modern environment.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Beautiful. Okay, so I brought the food choice report up first because one of the big things that is thrown around a lot on social media, or one of the things that we hear about, especially if we are not well, is cut out dairy, cut out gluten, because they're inflammatory and they're not good for you. There is truth in both of those statements, but of course I always look at people's genes to say, okay, well, what's actually true for that person? And for Jacqui, we'll scroll down and show that her celiac disease risk, so these genes that mean, does she have an inflammatory response when it comes to gluten? You can see there, but she does. Not completely suboptimal, it's not in the red, but when Jacqui includes gluten in her diet, it means that she does have an immune system reaction. She's more prone to, an immune reaction from gluten. It doesn't necessarily mean that she's going to be celiac or that she's going to develop celiac disease, but she is more likely to get that immune response or get a reaction when she has gluten. And from your experience, when you learned that, Jacqui, you were kind of like, what? I didn't feel like I had a problem with gluten. Is
Yeah, I did. And so I've significantly reduced it, if not mostly taken it out. And I've definitely seen a change in bloating and inflammation. So it has been a really good thing to discover.
Yeah, yeah. And the interesting thing at the time, before we went through your genetics, you were dairy free, and had some, like, weren't really focused on the gluten thing. And when we come
Yes.
down, look at this, we can actually see that your lactose tolerance. So this is the gene that encodes for turning our lactose into lactase and then obviously glucose. So it's the instruction for basically being able to utilize lactose as a fuel source. And you were like, nah, I don't do dairy. And now, after seeing this, you've introduced dairy back in.
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, this doesn't necessarily mean, and I always will say to people, it doesn't mean it's a free-for-all, especially if you haven't had those foods in a certain amount of time. Like if somebody has had dairy and gluten, they've removed them from their diet, I don't just say, hey, go nuts and add them back in. Sometimes it does require a wee bit of nuance in regards to gut health and things like that for people, because there's more to it than just like these factors. But for the most part, we know for you, yes, gluten is a good thing to include in your diet, but dairy is fine, specifically lactose, or foods higher in lactose, which is, yeah, always good to know, hey?
Yeah, very good.
All right, I'll stop sharing that one and go into one of my other reports for you. Disappeared. All right.
While you're looking for that, I just say it was was good. This information was good just to take the guesswork out of things, like it just was so confusing. So it just took the guesswork out. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually share now your interpretation report, that I did on top of your genetic results, just because it shows, I'll bring that up. It shows because with your genes as well, I guess another point that I want to be really clear about is, like we talked about, one gene equaling a disease doesn't, is very rare, but it's the same thing when we're looking at these functional genes. There are some genes that have quite a big impact, but we need to group them together and actually look at them from a holistic perspective and regarding their function in the body, not just say, oh, you've got this gene, that means you're, for example, more prone to a B12 deficiency, which is actually true for you, Jacqui.
Yes.
So you always need a supplement with B12. No, we need to look at it from a more holistic perspective from that. So in this report, what I've done is I grouped together a lot of those genes. So you can see from this kind of breakdown, there's groups in cellular health and detox, nutrition and nutrients, gut health, hormones, weight and metabolism, sleep and stress, exercise, and cardiovascular health. And I have included the same kind of traffic light system as well, just to make it nice and easy. So one of the areas that was relevant or was impactful for you, Jacqui, was the exercise stuff, is what you wanted to say.
Yeah.
So let's just scroll all the way down to this exercise stuff. So let me just bring that up a wee bit bigger. You can see there. So this is in the kind of weight and metabolism section. And as you can see, for Jacqui, there's a lot of kind of orange here, meaning there's a lot of points that we can focus on. For her, her metabolism speed is just a baseline, is naturally slower. You can see that in that one there. She's more prone to storing fat and holding fat. Again, for weight loss resistance, Jacqui is a little bit more prone to like want to hold and to store weight, and a little bit more resistant to wanting to actually just drop those, drop fat in particular off. And then for exercise, in terms of the response that she's going to get from exercise, her fat cells are going to release fuel a little bit less efficiently. So when we're thinking about the practicalities of all that, knowing that, okay, we've got a slower metabolism as just like a baseline, well, what are the ways that we can support and help that? One of them is holding on to muscle mass and building strength. So it's including things like that in your training and making sure that you've got some strength. And then thinking about knowing that your exercise response, you're not going to get huge bang for your buck. There's no point, Jacqui, hitting the gym to do any kind of training or really focusing on exercise day in, day out as a way to lose weight. We need to take a way more holistic approach when it comes to movement for the body, and if weight loss and fat loss is a goal, we're not just going to be relying on exercise to do it, because as a baseline, that's not what Jacqui's body wants or is going to actually respond to. So I know that it was a interesting insight for you when you got that.
Yeah, it was. And I think like the shift that I had, and it was intuitively I was feeling it. Now my exercise is what I enjoy doing rather than going and having to exercise. So I choose now to move my body for enjoyment as opposed to going somewhere and having to go somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. Which again, that's the thing. It's not to say that moving your body is not an important thing. It's just like knowing, okay, well, I'm not going to be one of these people that is highly responsive to moving my body all of the time. So you just do want to do what feels good for other reasons, if weight loss is a goal and things like that. So again, it's like a nice to know. Another area was your hormones that we talked about. So genetically, we can actually see how your hormones are set up. So in terms of hormone dominance, you can see there that Jacqui tends towards estrogen dominance. Now, there is a sort of even more heavily estrogen dominant version of this, and that would be, if she was in the red for that, and she's not. But in terms of your genetics, you can actually determine, or we can see how your body is set up to function, and whether you're more estrogen dominant or whether you're more sort of testosterone or androgen dominant. So I know that Jacqui was more estrogen dominant because of a couple of genes for her that meant that she converted her progesterone into testosterone at a faster rate, and then her testosterone into estrogens at a faster rate. And we all do this, like that's the way that we convert our hormones. It just depends on our genes as to how fast or slow we do both of those things. And then that determines whether we sit down that androgen sort of end of the spectrum, which tends to be people that experience things like polycystic ovary syndrome or things like that, or down the estrogen sort of dominant end of the spectrum. And for Jacqui, slightly more towards the estrogen side, which was not a surprise to you.
No.
Yeah. So again, pros and cons, like there's some good things about it. We tend to, if you're a little bit more estrogen dominant, you get a lot more of the feminine sort of effect, the breast growth, the curvy shape, the softer skin. But if we are not focusing on actually excreting and getting rid of those hormones really well, then we are more prone to PMS symptoms, heavy period, mood issues, and to holding on to weight. So again, it's not good or bad. It's just knowing where do I sit on that spectrum, and then how does that fit in with, I guess, all of my other genes and my lifestyle as well.
Yeah, and I think for me, I've taken on quite a detox life for about 9 years, but I thought, gosh, it would have been great to have known this information a lot earlier, to have adopted that a lot earlier.
Yeah, because it matters too, right? For people that are considering, for younger women that are potentially considering birth control methods, like it's good to know, okay, well, where do I sit on the spectrum? And then people that are going through the transition and looking at HRT, right? Is it right for me, and where does all of this sit? Because it doesn't matter where, as I said, like your gene dominance, that doesn't change in your lifetime. So whatever way you sit, it's going to be the same exactly, throughout your life. So it's kind of important information to know before you are diving into any kind of hormone replacement therapy. Well, where do I sit on that spectrum? Do I have a tendency towards, one or the other? And that is going to have like different outcomes as well, and things that you need to then mitigate, if you are going to have hormone replacement or contraception, I guess, at the other end.
This is a real opportunity to get that precision medicine, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Because this is you. This is your blueprint. This is the thing that, like these are, your genes are kind of the instruction manual for how your body operates. So, I mean, why not tap into that information, right? Know how you're set up to function. Because as I said, it's from birth to death, so it will be the same throughout your lifetime. Once you know that, you can adapt and change throughout our lifetime. As I said, if we knew that younger, you'd consider maybe different birth control when you're young, and then different HRT if that's something you want to do when you're older. It all depends. And when you know that information about yourself, then you can actually make a better and a more informed decision. Cool. So estrogen, so hormone dominance. Then we can also see the breakdown. So obviously we create our hormones, and we know that Jacqui tends to create a little bit more estrogen than other women. But then we need to break those hormones down, as I said. So there's hormone toxicity, and that is a lot of our phase 1 enzymes in our liver. And for Jacqui, this one here, you can see, is a definite weak point, or is more suboptimal. So Jacqui converts her estrogens down the more desirable pathway at a slower rate, and then sends her estrogens down the less desirable pathway at a faster rate. So that means that she can get sort of more toxicity symptoms, or more symptoms of estrogen dominance, like sort of mood issues, again, PMS and things like that. And if we're thinking this needs to happen in our liver, we can also obviously can clog up our rate of detox and our liver function and all of that kind of thing. If we're just continuously cycling our hormones and not getting rid of them properly, or sending them down not so great pathways, it just adds more load. So like you said, it would have been nice to know this information earlier, so that you could start implementing some of the things that you already do now early, right?
Yeah. And when I got this information, I did some testing on your instruction, and something that came out of it was my liver was distressed. So I did some liver detoxing, and just noticed, like huge difference, weight loss, and more stable mood wise. And so it's kind of, it started a ripple effect of looking at everything.
Yeah. And then the last one, I guess, in regards to hormones that we can see from a genetic perspective, is the clearance. So like I said, with hormone toxicity is in phase 1, so where we're sending those hormones initially in a first phase. Where we send them in phase 2 is where we look at this hormone clearance. And of course, there is actually a phase 3 as well, which is excretion from the body, and we think more about gut health and kidney function and lymphatic system and things like that for phase 3. But in regards to the hormone clearance through the liver, again, Jacqui was slower at detoxifying those estrogens. So she had more reactive, or was sending the hormones down a more reactive pathway in her body in phase 1, and then was slow to actually also clear them in that phase 2, which again just leads to more, I guess, liver sort of issues and more symptoms of estrogen dominance. So like that PMS, the mood swings, the irritability, like breast tenderness and things like that as well. And 2, for women that are more estrogen dominant, again, weight, like we can hold on to that a little bit more when less efficient at actually clearing our hormones. Yeah, awesome. Okay. What was the other area, Jacqui, that you were
Um,
looking at for gut health? This for Jacqui is a strength while we're here. So it's not all bad news with all of them. So for Jacqui, you can see she's in the green for gut. So when I'm looking and thinking about gut health, I'm looking at a couple of different things. So for your gut health, there is genes that determine the amount of kind of bifidobacteria, so one of the good kind of probiotics or bacteria in our gut. And there's also genes to determine the diversity as well in our gut. And Jacqui has great sort of a baseline for both of those things. And then because she's got really good vitamin D genes and things like that, it means, which is also a strength for you, Jacqui, your
mhm.
vitamin D genes, it means that she's at less risk of intestinal permeability or that leaky gut, because vitamin D is really, really important in keeping our gut junctions together. So for you, gut health is a strength, and also related to gut health, breaking down histamines is a strength for you as well. It's not to say, though, that you're going to be perfectly fine and you can do what you want and there's no issues in regards to gut health, because like we've already witnessed and seen, we know that you were having gluten for, a large
Okay.
chunk of your
Yeah.
life. And we know that that probably would have impacted your gut health. So even though your gut health is a strength, we still need to, potentially look at, oh, okay, well, because we've had an impact, because that would have been, driving up inflammation in the gut, we
Mm,
potentially still need to do some healing work here. So this is the thing. Your genes are your blueprint and they guide us, but it doesn't necessarily mean that, hey, even though something's a strength, we can just like wipe that off the table and it's totally fine and we don't need to deal with it. Sometimes there is, because it's always interacting with our lifestyle and there's things that change all of the time. There are still things that even when we have got strengths, we might need to work on and to
mm,
add some bits and pieces in
mm.
your gut health. But the good thing is that you kind of notice that bloating and things went away really quickly when you eliminated.
Significantly, yeah. When once I got this information and then cleared that liver, then yeah, significant shift. And I just keep going back to just really just it's all just been reassuring, like and it helps me understand and celebrate my body. So rather than thinking, was trying to navigate and decide and then thinking, oh, I'm hopeless and useless, I can't do this. It's been really empowering
Mm.
information.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess that's the thing, right? Like a lot of these things to you, I mean, there were some surprises like the gluten and things like
Yeah.
that, but you've been living in your body for 50 odd decades. And
Mm,
so a lot of it just gets to, is just reaffirming. It's like, yeah,
mm,
I thought there was things, for you in detox and stuff like that. You were like, hey, I was kind of aware of that, but
mm,
like I didn't know why necessarily. And this gives you the kind of answers as to why.
yeah.
Like,
And then
yeah.
I think it's also helped because I'm raising two daughters as well. So it's been able I've been able to support them as well.
Mm,
And because one of them does get breast tenderness, and so I was able to say, hey, look, chances are, like our genetics are estrogen dominant, so that's going to be the case there. But also been able to give her some guidance on how to support that. So reducing her detoxing her products that she's using around on her body,
mm,
around the home, I think's a real game changer.
mm. Yeah, definitely. And it's all
Yeah.
of these things, right? Like we've talked about, your genes interact with the environment. So even though things are strengths it's for you and things like that, it doesn't mean that you get the pass there. We still need
Mm,
to give those genes the right environment to thrive. So, as you said, she's probably at least somewhere on the spectrum estrogen dominant, depending on what
mhm.
your dad gave her as well.
Yeah.
But has got a chance of leaning towards that way, and probably or more likely as well, even if it's not sort of necessarily leaning towards estrogen dominance, she highly likely is got that toxicity sort of factor and
Mm,
slower clearance as well. So
yeah.
because those were more, you had two copies of that version, so she's likely to have one of those. It's not it's not going to be that great for her, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. And then I guess a big part of why people come for their genes is because they're so confused about what to eat. So we've covered some of this information in the prior report, but again, I sum that up in this interpretation report, and that we know that dairy was okay for Jacqui. We know that gluten was actually not so good.
Mhm.
And caffeine, it's not something that you typically have, is it? But you're
No.
actually, it's in the green here. Really, it probably needs to be in kind of an orange, but you are actually a slower metabolizer in your liver because, again, it comes into that sort of phase
Mhm.
one. But there's another gene that we look at that binds to adenosine receptors, which is the kind of thing that makes us feel drowsy and sleepy and all of that. And you're actually quite good there. So, technically speaking, the people that have that version, which you've got, those are the people that tell me, oh yeah, I can drink an espresso at 8 o'clock at night and go to
Mhm.
sleep fine, and it's no problem at all for me.
Mhm.
Whereas, and that actually is you, although I know you don't do that, but there
Mhm.
are people that do that, and they're slower to metabolize it in their liver, so
Mhm.
it's not such a great thing to be doing.
Yeah.
But I mean, what's your experience been like with coffee and caffeine?
Well, interesting. Both my parents can drink coffee just before they go to bed. And I certainly can relate to the part where it's talking about affects anxiety. Um, because when I did drink caffeine, I felt it did support me in in those times. So I can relate to that. But yeah, my parents still drink it just before they go to bed, which I didn't I didn't try. But I also don't. I'm not missing not having caffeine. It was quite a crutch for me. Yeah.
And again, it all is in the context, right?
Yeah.
For the caffeine, we know, okay, so you're a slow metabolizer in your liver. Technically speaking, you're like your parents and you could drink it
Mhm.
and it's not going to have an effect on your sleep, so to, as such. But it is going to have an effect on your liver. And when we've just talked about your hormones and being a slower detox, you're slower at detox
Mhm.
or more compromised in that sense, then of course it's not something that you should probably
Mhm.
be having on a regular basis or ongoing basis. So again, there's always nuance and there's always interpreting, I guess, all of this in the right way
Mhm.
to say, well, is it something that that person should be having or is it not?
Yeah. And
So
it's interesting now that I've sort of done the cleansers, the liver cleansers, etc. I am more in tune, and because I've done, I feel cleansed, I'm more motivated to put clean food, you know, reduce any sort of pharmaceuticals. In fact, had none so far, and but 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 actually follow more of these guidelines to help me nourish myself now because I've done the cleanse and I feel great. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and not so reliant on other things for energy levels and all of that.
No, no,
Right?
no,
Just
there's very, very little, if any, of that now. Yeah.
yeah. So the other thing around some of the nutrition, nutrients things, obviously hugely, hugely important in terms of what makes up our diet is what nutrients we need more of. Because if
Mhm.
we are nutrient deficient, that in and of itself will add a layer of stress onto our body. So knowing that information can, one, know what foods that you need to get more of, and if you're
Mhm.
not going to get those foods in your diet, then what supplements you might like to consider or add into your regime. Because again, a lot of people are just taking things based on, oh, is that, like I've heard that's good for you, I heard that's good. Well, it's good to know what you actually do need. And again,
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of food first, and I really encourage people to try and get as much of these nutrients and things as they can through their food. But the reality is sometimes people are just not going to like those foods.
Mm.
For example, like omega fatty acids, we know that, Jacqui, you are slower at converting your omega-3s from the plant-based sources, so the ALA sources, into the active forms, the EPA and DHA, which means that you can eat chia seeds and flax seeds and all of those great things, but we wouldn't want to rely on those for your omega-3 intake. Having things like salmon, mackerel, sardines, herring, like those small fish products are going to be really, really important. Lots of the time people don't like that and they're like, nah, can't eat those foods, and that's where considering like an omega-3 supplement can be really beneficial. So again, it's knowing those kinds of things. Same thing like we talked about, we know, Jacqui, you're more prone to a B12 deficiency, so it's really important that, one, she gets animal products in her diet. That's where B12 comes from, predominantly, unless it has been added into the food or fortified into the food. And that, you know, at the end of the day, if Jacqui decided she didn't want to go vegan, more sort of plant-based, and cut animal foods out from her diet, she would definitely need to supplement, because genetically she is at risk of lower B12 levels, and it's hugely, hugely important that she makes sure she gets enough of that in. Same thing with the folate. So for those that have heard perhaps about MTHFR, that's a big popular gene that involves your need for folate in your body, and Jacqui is in that orange zone there. You can see B6 she needs more of, again, animal foods from B6. Choline, same things, eggs is your best source, but Jacqui needs more of those. See, vitamin C she needs more of, vitamin A, zinc, CoQ10. So when, I guess with all of that, for me, if I'm going to recommend, I don't ever say, hey, you need to follow a particular diet, you need to be vegan, you need to be carnivore, you need to be whatever it is. I don't really care what you decide or what diet you subscribe to. I care about the nutrients that you need to get. So again, looking at this and thinking, wow, okay, there's a lot of different things that Jacqui needs more of. A lot of them come in animal foods. So again, when we're trying to align your genes and your environment, being vegan for Jacqui is going to be a lot more complicated and probably not going to be such a great thing. But again, if you do want to do that for whatever reason, ethical reasons or whatever reason that you choose, you can, and you just know now, okay, from this blueprint, I know these are the things that I need to get in supplement form. And you'd be taking quite a bit, you know. And then some other wee things like taste perception is something that we look at. So what whether you are more prone to want to crave sweet things, or not crave, but whether you're a sweet liker, you can see that Jacqui is a little bit more has a tendency towards that side of things. But when we look at sugar cravings, she's not, from her brain, that's where sugar cravings comes in. It's a gene in your brain that detects your glucose levels, and that will drive you towards sugar. So we're set up the same here, Jacqui. I'm not prone to sort of want sugar or be driven towards raising my glucose levels or wanting a higher sugar consumption. But when I do have it, because my sweet taste perception is like yours and it's a little bit sort of dimmed, then I'm like, oh yeah, that's quite good. And I might have a little bit more than somebody that had a higher sweet taste perception. So again, it's like small little things, knowing that about yourself, saying, okay, well, either I just don't have it like near me, and then that makes it easy because I'm not driven towards those kinds of cravings. Or if I'm going to have it, knowing that, okay, I'm probably going to want a little bit more than most, because it takes my body and my taste perception a little bit longer to actually get the cue that I'm having some sweet food and to get that satisfaction in. So it's kind of, again, interesting information when we're trying to tailor how and why and what things to eat for people. It's all, really relevant information. And then again, food and nutrition standpoint. So Jacqui's not a hyper absorber of fats, which is a great thing. But again, she's got a wee bit more of a tendency to have blood sugar imbalances. So again, making sure that her blood sugars are stable. having sort of like 3 good meals every day with proteins, fats, and carbohydrates in them is a great start. And then again, satiety, right? So that same thing for us, knowing that, okay, well, if I'm going to feel from a genetic standpoint, Jacqui and I both come to the table and we have, you know, I don't know, a lovely like organic salad or whatever. Jacqui is going to feel less satiated after that meal than what I am if I was green. I can't remember what my genes are for that. I want to say that I'm probably similar to you, but that's the thing. Like your level of sort of feeling full after a meal is determined by your genes. And so it's little simple changes and hacks, knowing that, okay, well, if that's the case, that means that I need to chew my food thoroughly. I need to make sure that I give myself time after I eat to actually register the fullness before I go up and just decide to have more and more and more, because it is just going to take longer. It's the reality of it. And I've had people say to me just that alone, and it seems like such a simple change, but that has made them realize, oh my gosh, I was constantly overeating and feeling full and bloated, and now I just give myself a wee bit more time.
Yeah, that was a big one for me too. It was good. Yeah.
And it sounds incredibly simple and almost like, of course you do that, but we don't do it often, and we feel still hungry. So it's like we feel justified in going and getting more and more and more. And it's like, well, when you realize, you can give yourself a bit of grace and just know, oh, it's just going to take me a little bit longer for this to all settle. And
I think a lot of us 70s kids were left at the table until we finished what was on our plate. So we actually didn't get the opportunity to really get interoceptive that way. Yeah.
And that's the thing, right? When you start ignoring these cues and all of these signals in our body, at the end of the day, that a lot of it is satiety and things as hormones. When we start ignoring that, well, we're just going to keep overriding it, and the messaging is not going to go through.
It gives a good overview of what comes of it. I thought also it might be quite good to share with people how these results come about. So how a kit is sent to us, and we do like a swab of our mouth, and then it's sent off, and then there's a little bit of wait time before we get the results back, and then work alongside you to get all of this interpretation and answers to our questions. But it's just that simple. That's how simple it is as well. And I think the real game changer, the impact that it does have on health, and it definitely has been for me. It's just feel vitality from having the information. Yeah,
that's great. And yes, as you said, it is a really simple process. It isn't a blood test, which is often what people think that it's going to be. It's just a saliva swab that you do on the inside of your cheek at home. It does, because of the testing, we unfortunately don't have a lab in New Zealand that does this testing yet. I say yet because I'm sure there will be in the future. So it gets sent to Australia. So there's the postage time, and of course it's a little bit more complex. Your genes and your DNA is a little bit more complex than, a simple blood test. So it does take time to actually get that data and that analysis done. About 4 to 6 weeks from when the laboratory receives it. So again, it can be kind of up to 8 weeks for some people. It depends how fast, one, the postage is, and two, how quickly the lab
processes.
She gets to your results. So it does take time, but it's a one and done. Like once you've done it, that's it. There's no more testing. You've got your blueprint, and you've got it.
Yeah. And then you're excellent with helping me work out how to get the testing, just to check, on those B12s, B6s and things like that. So that was great too. So it's almost, I just really want to reiterate that we still need to take radical responsibility from this information and just keep moving forward with it. Actually take the information and run with it really, and utilize it. And you're a great guide on how to do that, on what to do next. and you're very generous with what you share through free webinars and our podcast and our Power Hour. So we'll include all of those in this recording as well. And I think with all that information, it's going to be really crystal clear for people how to access this, and the precision medicine that comes from it, the precision health and vitality that comes from it.
Yeah. And I guess the final thing that I always reiterate is that a huge part of why I got into this work and into functional genetic testing, and what really motivated me, is because you are an N of one, right? And what I mean by that is, like in science, we look at groups, we look at control groups, and we study a particular group, but there is so many confounding factors that, yes, there is scientific evidence for this, that, and the other thing, but at the end of the day, what makes up you is, one, your genetics, and then your lifestyle and the things that you do on top of that. And so even though the science says this and this, like some person might have said this online, we still need to know how that's going to interact with you. And so I guess that's the thing. It's when you actually get to look at your blueprint, you actually get to do the thing that works for you, and you're not just doing the one size fits all and the, he said, she said kind of approach. You get to tailor it a lot more. And as you say, be a lot more precise. Like, it's precision kind of strategies that you get to put in place. Because at the end of the day, you're an individual. And, I think that's the really important thing that I like people to remember. Even though there's a lot of good scientific evidence for a lot of different things out there, you are still, one. You are still your own science experiment. And I think it's really
that's true. Yeah.
To remember. Yeah. And this is a way that you get to, experiment on yourself.
Yeah.
Right. I've got my blueprint. I've got my instruction manual.
Yeah. And I think it's never too late, right?
No.
Yeah.
No, because your genes, as I've said, do not change throughout your lifetime, and they are constantly interacting with your environment. So if you are in your 70s, 80s, whatever, if you start giving yourself things that you need from a genetic standpoint, that's going to have an interaction on your genes straight away. So it doesn't matter when you start all of the stuff. Obviously, the earlier we know this information, the better. Yeah. But yeah, it's constant daily impact, constant daily impact. So it's never too late to make change. No.
Oh, well, thanks, Aubrey. I look forward to sharing this far and wide and helping people truly understand this new wave of supporting ourselves to vitality.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jacqui.
Yeah, you're welcome.